Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. First responders and mental health experts collaboratively created FST5 to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association, and the former chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our resident subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. In today's episode, we welcome Mike Harris, a state of Michigan representative of the 52nd District, and a retired police officer. Representative Harris brings first-hand insight into the challenges frontline workers face. After years in law enforcement, Mike understands the toll frontline work takes on mental and behavioral health, which has driven his commitment to public safety and mental health advocacy. After completing his law enforcement career, he felt called to create change at a higher level, leading him to the Michigan House of Representatives, where he champions policies that support the well-being of Michigan's first responders. Today, Representative Harris shares the experiences that have shaped his advocacy, his perspective on current mental health resources, and his vision for a more supportive legislative environment. During this episode, Representative Harris discusses how his background in law enforcement shapes his approach to policy, providing a unique understanding of the key challenges frontline workers face and the critical need for mental health support. He shares insights on current legislative efforts and future initiatives aimed at expanding access to mental health resources and emphasizes the importance of including frontline workers' voices, not just administrations, in the policy-making process to create more effective and supportive measures. As always, we aim to provide a meaningful conversation that informs, educates, and inspires those on the front lines and their families. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline Podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
All right. Well, we're here with Ashley. This is not Mike. Usually I'm here with Mike. This is my buddy Ashley.
I was going to take a wild guess. Hi, Ashley.
So as we said in the introduction, Ashley is an EMT joining us today. We always like to include people from all of the FST5 in these conversations. And happens to be you're a retired police officer. So once a police officer, always a police officer, we like to say. So you're still a member of the FST5.
Yes.
Well, why don't you give an overview of who you are, what you do, and where you do it now, and everything from your professional career as a police officer to what you're up to these days.
Awesome. Well, usually my biggest identity is that I'm a family guy. I got 6 kids, as I mentioned earlier, and so I'm married. My wife and I have raised 6 wonderful kids. One of my boys actually just went to the fire academy, started on Monday.
Awesome.
And so we've given him over to the first responder group
Keeping it in the family.
Keeping it in the family. I did tell him that because he was smarter than me, he probably should go into the fire academy instead of the police academy.
Right.
I mean, fair enough, right?
Yeah. I mean, I watch your guys' schedule. Do you see how much crap they got to carry? They got back problems after a year just from carrying all the things in the vest. They're in a car alone the whole shift because you guys don't have partners anymore. You don't get to cook dinner together.
Right.
There's no wiffle ball. There's no basketball. There's no fun. What do you do? Catch bad guys all day?
It's weird. Yeah, I mean, it's not as fun as the fire service, I'm sure, but
it's a different kind of fun, I assume. But yeah, I would never be a police officer because it didn't look as fun to me.
No.
That was it. That was my only thing. It just didn't look as fun.
If I did it all over again, I think I'd give that a try. I spent 26 years in law enforcement, and to kind of tell you how I got to where I am now, I probably should go back a little bit, back to my college days, and I initially, my major was political science, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
And my first day of class, I got in a fight with my instructor. I shouldn't say a fight. Got in an argument, a disagreement.
A healthy discussion.
Yes. I don't know if it was healthy, though.
Sure.
But, it had to do with some bias grading based on political beliefs. And I decided, you know what? I'm not getting into this politics stuff. This is ridiculous. And I had a Navy SEAL that I had developed a relationship with, and I'm like, well, maybe I should go in the military. Maybe I should do this. And I said, what do Navy SEALs want to do when they're done being Navy SEALs? And he goes, they want to be cops. I went, well, that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So I went in and talked to the dean, and we ended up changing my major over to criminal justice.
Right there. Well, a lot of people, not a lot, but it's not uncommon to go from political science to law enforcement, as I've seen in the past.
It's a political job, too. I probably credit my parents with, really pushing for respect of first responders back when I was a kid. Like, I wasn't even allowed to watch Dukes of Hazzard because it made the police look bad, right? Made them look corrupt, make them look like buffoons. My dad's like, you're not watching that stuff. You're going to have respect for these guys. And so I think I probably held them in high regard as I got older. And I'm like, okay, well, if my dad appreciates these guys, that's probably worth getting into.
Yeah, and that shows that you liked your dad and he liked you. If you have that type of reverence for his recommendations there.
Yeah, I have a great relationship with my parents, still do. But anyhow, so I went through school, got my degree in criminal justice. While I was doing that, I got my basic EMT license and did that for a really short time in Flint, but I wanted to make myself more marketable for any police agencies that, back then it was competitive, right? Very competitive.
Right.
And so I went to Delta College up in Bay City and got my police academy done. Then I ended up working for a little town out in Shiawassee County called Durand. Worked there for a short time, and then Waterford Township picked me up. And worked there for 25 years and retired back in May of 21.
Oh, man, you retired right as things got about as crazy as I ever saw them in my career.
They did.
During COVID and right after COVID, it was a much different world for law enforcement officers, fire, EMS on the road. It was so different.
Yeah.
And I saw a couple of people retire right before March of 2020. Mm-hmm. Like this, they were just timing up. I'm like, dude, you win.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't win better.
I know, seriously. And I don't want to say it was good for me, but I actually had a shoulder injury. And so I was out on a workman's comp because I had shoulder surgery done. So there was a little bit of time I was away from the office during the whole COVID thing, which, I mean, it worked out great for me, but it was definitely a trying time for the guys,
Yeah, you had a excuse to be homebound. You could almost accept it easier than we could.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you're like, oh, no, I'm home, I'm injured. Whereas everybody else is like, you're out there, you're following these protocols that felt, am I doing this right? Am I not? It's not 100%. You get it. It was this whole mess. But yeah, man, it caused a lot of stress going on calls with police officers during and after COVID. It just was different.
It was.
We knew so little at the beginning, right? And so I think there was a high level of concern right up front. We don't know what we're dealing with. Yeah. We can call it whatever we want to, but we don't know the ramifications of this yet. And then as things progressed, it was this constant, we called it a living policy. Our policies changed day by day on exactly how we had to deal with it, based on new information that came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same with EMS protocols. It was like every morning we had a briefing on like what was different this shift than last.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you throw that stress on top of just the normal job stress, and these guys dealt with a lot.
And I know a lot of first responders, too, when it first came out and we didn't know the ramifications of everything, a lot of us were separated from our family. Yes. So we would send the kids to grandma and grandpa's, or, you'd have a camper and you'd sleep in that in the driveway. So a lot of us were separated from our families, too, to protect them. And that was really hard, too.
Yes.
All of the frontline community got affected. But one of the things that was going on at the same time was a lot of angry, loud voices having their, let's say, concerns with law enforcement on the national scale. What did you see out of all that? How it made you guys feel? You were in the middle of all that right before you left.
I think there's many times we see waves of things that happen across the nation, right? And there's a certain temperature or environment that I think, especially police, really kind of weather through the years. And, the defund the police movement, I think, became this national wave that we saw hitting certain states differently, certain regions differently. I was very lucky in where I worked. We didn't have violent protests. We did have people that came out and peacefully protested and we appreciated that, right? We want people to be able to peacefully protest, and we want to be in a position where we can protect people that are taking that First Amendment step, right? No problem there. And the people that were in our community, they acted responsibly. They acted great. Whether you agree with the issue or not, they did what they should have done. And they actually met with the police department prior to. It was great.
They were respectful, even though you guys had different opinions.
100%. And then we saw other areas that had major issues, right? And it just made me very thankful that I wasn't in that predicament, but then I also felt horrible for the first responders that had to deal with those things. It was tough, and I'm not sure I would wish that situation on anybody.
Yeah. It made me feel, and in every industry, in every walk of life, get out of the FST5. There's bad guys in every walk of life, right? So to say every cop's great is like horrible.
Right.
And it's the same to say every cop's bad.
Right.
It's just so silly to me. But I could certainly empathize with people that have feelings based on their experiences and the nuances that they've seen. I certainly validate their feelings on that, and I hope we can find a better way to all kind of get along, if you will. So let's move down the road here and what we're really talking about today, and it's really the frontline community and mental and behavioral health. So we talked prior to this, but explain to everybody when you realized that behavioral and mental health was an actual thing that we need to be considerate of on the frontline communities.
I think it goes back to even before I was a police officer. When I was an EMT is when I saw my first dead body, and it was a little bit of a shock to me. But then I saw other people, their reactions to it, and some of them seemed like it was just another day, right? But to me, that was the first time. So that was like, oh, this is a big deal. And, I think as we progress through our careers, we get used to certain traumatic events, and it becomes more like that day-to-day thing. So I saw people either compartmentalize issues or just they were so desensitized to it that, they just moved on. And I remember that when I started police work, and while I was in training, very interesting story, especially for any newbies that might be listening. I'm sitting in dispatch. We'd stopped in to get some paperwork, and this call came in, and the dispatchers are busy. So my training officer said, "Hey, grab that phone." So I answered the phone, and it was a man saying, "I just got a call from my brother and said that he just shot his wife."
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, wow, okay. So I'm trying to get what information I can. I'm new, so I'm hoping I get all the right information, right? And then I pass it off to a dispatcher, and we immediately go there. We were the first officers to get there after taking that call, and I'll never forget it. This guy had shot his wife. It was a domestic situation, obviously. Shot his wife, shot himself, and left their 3-year-old in bed upstairs. And I can still tell you the pajamas that kid was wearing. I carried him out of the house. It was Buzz Lightyear. Black pajama. I can tell you everything about this kid. And so I think I had a very early view on there's some mental health things that, there's baggage that we pack during our careers that we carry with us the entire time, right? And as the years go on, that just compounds, and instead of just packing one little duffel bag, you got a whole set of luggage with you by the time you retire, right? And so I'd say about a year after I started, I ended up on the training unit doing the use of force training. And luckily, Waterford was a great department as far as getting you educated. So if there's schools that you wanted to go to, there are things that would benefit the department and the guys that you work with. As long as it worked into the schedule, you could go. The money was there. We had money set aside for great training. And so I was able to go to a lot of things that dealt with not only the physical side of use of force, but also some of the ramifications mentally on use of force. Wow. So early in my career, I got exposed to people like Dr. Artwall. So I got exposed to experts, national experts, probably international experts on some of these issues early on in my career. And we found that it was very beneficial to take some of those things that we learned and put them into training and help people understand that bad things happen sometimes while we're here, and expect that this is going to give you some baggage. And, we talk how to work through it and whatnot. The other side of it is fairly early in my career. We actually had an officer commit suicide. It was probably the darkest day in my history at the police department, and unfortunately he took his family with him. And that was probably the biggest wake-up call we had. I knew how I felt on things, and I think I had developed a very healthy way to deal with certain things. But when I saw that first guy really struggle and get to that point, that's when I think it was a huge eye-opener for me, just how bad things could get. And then it was a huge struggle for all of his colleagues.
Did he have any signs showing that he was in distress?
You know,
not everybody does.
No,
that's just why I asked.
He was a very kind of stoic or cynical kind of guy, and that was just his personality day to day. And he kept that even through some of his stresses. Looking back, I think we can see that some of that was masking.
But when it's every day and it's the brand, if you will,
it is.
And one of the things we've learned is the change in personality should trigger a spidey sense to go, my buddy need a hand? Manisha's been on here talking about how some people are going to seem as happy as you ever seen them. They're totally hiding everything. It is what it is. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah. And I think there were some things that he felt he was going to get in trouble for, and it was an embarrassment to him and his family. And I think that was the excuse anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it was sad. And then, we had a couple of guys at the end of my career had passed away. Well, actually, we had one guy mid-career attempted suicide. He had been let go from the police department, and within a couple of years, he had really gone down a dark path, and he had threatened suicide, and so we dealt with that. I think he's fine.
Great.
So, that's taken time. But we had two of my other peers that actually committed suicide after they left the PD. And so, it's been a progression.
Well, now it is statistically, you have twice the chance of dying by suicide than you do in the line of duty now.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
No.
Like when you're in the academy, I go through a floor, ceilings can come down, things happen. But like me doing it myself never crossed my mind. I was 20 years old, right? You don't even think about these things.
Yep.
And which tees me up for this. Would you agree that it's not just the calls we go on? It's everything we've ever experienced, and we don't know everybody's history. And sometimes we go on things and deal with traumatic things that either trigger or exacerbate the feelings we've had for so long that have been inside of us. And the lifestyle of a frontline worker who can go through lots of different traumatic events could exacerbate what they already have and reveal their problems that they came into the job with.
100%. 100%. And it's, and I think this has been a struggle sometimes getting people outside of this life to understand all the little nuances that affect people's behavioral health. And it's huge. And you're right. Some people come into the job with some issues or develop that over time that may be not job related, but there's things on the job that just
exacerbate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets too much for people sometimes. I know you haven't been around the block for as long as us old guys.
Yeah, we have a lot grayer hair.
Yeah. But back in the day, there was such a stigma with getting help.
Oh, dude, yeah.
It was horrible. You were weak or...
If you just said you went to yoga...
I can't even imagine.
Right.
I
brought this up before. When I was a rookie, a guy walked in and he had let's call it a man bag. This is like 2004, right?
It's a satchel. Indiana Jones had one, right?
I'm using the terminology specifically for the time. 2004, it wasn't exactly like, yeah, he's got a bag. No. But now it was like he had a man bag and there was a loofah hanging out of it. And I watched this old guy go, was that a loofah? I'll never forget that. And now, 20 years later, you look at any of the showers, there's like loofahs in them.
Yeah.
There's yoga mats in the station. There's breathwork people coming in. There's mental health resources everywhere now in comparison to where we were. And they'll give you time off to go to therapy if you want it. So, like...
Isn't that crazy?
It's so cool.
I grew up in EMS, so as a kid, I would hang out at the station. So... I haven't worked it back then, obviously, but I seen the atmosphere and how mental health was not talked about, and how when you went on a bad call, you didn't talk about it, and you just went on and you pushed it aside. So I've seen the difference from an outside perspective of how it used to be, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an analogy, but we're so close-knit. And sometimes we alienate people on the outside of our
100%.
careers, right? And so we think, oh, we can do it all ourselves. We can do this. And we start to sometimes be either cynical or not trusting of people on the outside. And so what we were finding is we had some departments that were sending people to the outside that really had no background or basis in either law enforcement or fire service or EMS. And the trust wasn't there. I think we found major benefit to having peers be able to talk to each other, have crisis intervention teams that were made up of first responders be able to come in after an incident and help with debriefings and walk people through things. It was such a huge benefit. And it was when our officer took his life and his family's life that I think a lot of people started being open to that discussion.
The critical incident stress management, at least that.
Right.
Not long-term care like, hey, everybody should go see a clinician, if you will.
Correct.
But at least saying, hey, a big thing happened and we got to offload some of this and talk through it so it doesn't sit inside of you, because unexpressed emotions will build up. That's what all those angst and the cynicism and all those things, that's what that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's painful to know that people are walking around with that. So let's get into a little bit of the politics, if you will.
Yeah.
Why not? So
kind of what I do now, right?
Right. So you're like sick of it.
Full circle, right? I started in college not wanting to do that, after that disagreement. Now here I am.
Now you're back in
so
it.
let's finish that story. How did you become a state representative, and what do you do?
It's an interesting conversation. So what got me to this point now? So about 6 years before I retired, I had two former friends of mine that were state reps in my seat. And so I had a glimpse into that, and what that world might be like. But during that time, a friend of mine was going to vacate a seat and run for the Senate. And so he said, I think you'd be great at this, and I think you should consider running. I'm like, there is no way I'm giving up my pension to go make $72,000 a year.
And
no
more people hate me.
Yeah, right. If police work wasn't contentious enough, get into politics.
Yeah, what did Joe Tate say? One contact sport to another? When he's going from football to politics?
Yeah, he's not wrong. I tell people all the time, I said, well, I didn't get shot at enough in police work, so I go into politics.
Yeah, you might get a shoe thrown at you in politics. We've seen that a couple of times.
That has happened, right? I am kind of dodgy. So I said no then, because I was going to finish my career and whatnot. Well, unfortunately, this is an absolutely sad way to get into politics, but my predecessor passed away from cancer. God bless her. She was well respected in the community, and she struggled with it for a while she was in office, and she passed away, and it left that seat open. And I had retired in March of 21. I went and did PI work right after that for about a year. But during that time, I got a couple calls and they were like, I know it's not necessarily how you wanted to run, but the seat's open. If you're going to do it, now is probably the time for you to do it. And you're retired. So I'm like, I got to think about it. So I wanted to talk to my wife, wanted to talk to the kids, because this political world impacts your entire family, right? Of course, police work did too, but
sure. I mean, now there's commercials, your name's on things.
Yes,
Before
now
you were a representative of an agency, now you're like putting your brand out there.
Correct.
To enter this political market, if you will.
My family ends up on political literature and, commercial, so I want to make sure that it was something that everybody was going to be on board with. And then I remember during COVID, I'm sitting on the couch, and normally I'm not a vocal guy with like...
On the couch with the shoulder injury?
No, I was done. I was healed. And first the wife said, it's been 2 weeks. You need to go get a job. Since I retired, my wife she is a worker. She is a go-getter. And she's like, you got to do something. Well, I'm sitting there and I had this internal conversation with myself. And I used to tell my guys, because I was union president at the police department too. I used to tell my guys, hey, don't just come to me with a complaint. I don't want to hear you just complain about something. Come be part of the solution. Either bring me a solution, sign up, put your name attached to the, running for a board position, whatever. Be part of fixing something. Put your name on something and get involved and try and fix it or make things better. And I'm like, doggone it, I'm going to have to run. So that was the final decision for me. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. So I jumped in. It was a 4-way primary when I first ran and came out on top. And then I had to run again. So I got into office May of 22, and I had to run again that same year for the regular election in November. You want to talk about just nonstop.
Yeah.
And but it was interesting. And, they talk about when you get to Lansing, the tagline is, you'll be drinking from a fire hose, right, when you're trying to learn. I didn't get the hose. They just hooked me right up to the hydrant. and they didn't even flush it first. It was very interesting. They took me to my seat on the House floor and showed me the buttons on how to vote and patted me on the back and said, good luck, ask if you have any questions.
Here's a manual.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, all right, I have a lot of questions. But I got to say, I think police work was an amazing precursor to going into this, because think about all the situations a first responder has to navigate in their career. Many times you go into something, you have no idea what to do, but you don't have the choice to not do something. You have to take action, right? So getting into politics, I felt like I was prepared for whatever was going to get thrown at me, because...
Was it almost like a relation to the procedural aspect of politics is a lot like being a first responder? And it's almost like, here are the steps you do, and every time the circumstances changes, you kind of shift and you keep following the procedure. It seems a lot like that.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of procedures to learn. I mean, obviously, police and fire and EMS, we got policy books we got to go through, right? And manuals that we got to make sure we abide by.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting going from being in the executive branch of government and enforcing laws to then going into a different branch. So I took that perspective with me, and now I'm making laws where I saw some of the fallacies in some of the laws that we had created before, and either issues with how it was written on how we could enforce things. And now I'm in a position to actually write things or change things.
Intent and execution through words and you can help that, because you've had to prosecute, for lack of a better term. You've had to enforce the law. So that's so great that we can have somebody with decades worth of experience like, hang on, you're going to want to change this word so that when the officer's out there, they can do these things, which protects the person as well, whatever it is.
I always say proof's in the pudding,
right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't plan on getting my law degree, so I probably won't go into the judicial side of government anymore. So I'll stick with 2 out of the 3 branches of government.
Okay, so in that branch that you're working in right now, what specific actions or initiatives can Michigan frontline workers kind of expect from the House to improve access to mental and behavioral health? What are we looking at over the next year, 5 years, whatever it is?
Let me start with, we actually have more first responders actually working as House members now than I think we've had in a long time, on both sides of the aisle.
Amazing.
Right? We have police officers. We have currently 1 firefighter paramedic, and we have some other people in the health realm. I know we have, I think, 1 or 2 candidates that are coming from the fire paramedic realm. So I think we have people that actually have the insight and knowledge to help share that and try and move policy that benefits things like mental health for our first responders. And I think I said earlier, we've thrown some money at things in the budget to try and help, and I think that's a start. It's something that we need to make sure is continued funding and maybe even increased funding, but I don't want to just generally throw a bunch of money at something without a purpose, right? We need groups like you that know how to take that money and execute and narrowly define what we need to do to benefit first responders across the state and their families, honestly. So I think it's something that we need to look at policy-wise. What policies can we do that will help augment the money that we're putting into this type of investment? Because I think it's an investment that absolutely has to be made, and I think it needs to be kind of the standard, right? Because things aren't getting easier.
Right.
The environment's changed. Like you mentioned before, we had firefighter cancer presumption, right? And our office is actually working on another piece of the firefighter cancer that will help put into policy the early testing pieces and make sure that's funded. I know we have things appropriated for it now, but I want a policy to match up with that.
With the mental health screenings?
Yeah.
We're seeing a big trend and a push for cancer, cardiac, and mental health screenings. Yep. And they got a big head start on cardiac and cancer because of the data.
Correct.
There's data and objective diagnostic equipment that could eliminate my early death, tremendously reduce the cost of my health care by noticing things earlier.
Yes.
And so what we're now seeing is that same process being introduced for mental health. So in a perfect world, we have systems and nuances and contracts set up so that every labor agreement, every union, every HR can call a simple place and have all their personnel screened for these things because it's good for everybody.
It is.
Everybody wins if you catch the problem early.
Yes. And I think coming from the first responder side, I think some of the things have gotten better, but I think part of the initial resistance to that is, well, I don't want somebody that my boss is employing to know this information about me. I don't want to volunteer this information because how's that going to affect my job? Am I going to get fired? Am I going to get put on leave? Am I going to get passed over for a promotion? Am I going to get disciplined on something that now I am sharing to try and help my mental health, but how is that going to impact me? And I think the process has gotten so much better. And I think early on, I think we just needed time to prove that that wasn't the case.
Attrition helped too.
It did.
It does. It always does.
Yep.
I mean, the next generation gets to see the strengths and weaknesses of their predecessors and build on it. It doesn't make the people before them bad. It just gives the next people an opportunity to see what worked and what didn't.
Came from a different world,
That's
right?
it. That's all it is.
Yeah. So I think people now have seen the proof that this is not being used against you, right? Or if it is, it's rare circumstances and hopefully it gets addressed. But generally speaking, this is something that's such a huge benefit, and I think people are understanding everything's attached, right? Yeah. It's a vicious circle. So your physical health affects your behavioral health. Your behavioral health affects your physical health. And all of those things affect family life, your career, how you interact with people.
How you human.
Thank you.
Right? It's what it is. It's how do you, and that's not my term. Shout out to Crystal down in Florida, another firefighter. But yeah, she's like, you just got to learn how to human. It's like that. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So what have been some of the challenges that you have faced in the legislature when trying to push for more mental health resources for first responders, and how have you addressed them?
I think a lot of it is just first responders in general. Any policy or appropriations that we're dealing with first responders, whether it's mental health or some other issue, I think it's been difficult to try and impart some of the nuances to things and have people on the outside understand why we need something. I think people look at us sometimes as every other profession. Well, okay, why doesn't the guy at the shop need this, or why doesn't the guy doing lawn care need this, or and I think it's trying to, in a very short time frame, impart a lot of the intricacies to our jobs and the things that we go through, like I talked earlier, and why we need that investment and why we need policy changes on certain issues. And so conversation's key, right? And you got to start at some point, and I think the conversation just needs to continue and keep growing and educating. I mean, it has resulted in some funding for some things. I just think we can do so much more.
I know that I hear a lot, well, that's what you signed up for when you became a firefighter, a police officer,
I've heard that a few
paramedic.
times.
And the thing that I always try and point out is we signed up to help people. We didn't sign up not to be human and have emotions.
Correct.
And I think that's a big thing about it.
I still get that in this job. Well, you signed up for that.
Yeah.
I truly believe that, and that's part of what got me into this, is I still think I can help people, right? I mean, we do a lot of constituent work out of our office, and that's really a big focus of mine. It's less policy issues, honestly, and more helping people navigate the crazy government bureaucracy stuff that sometimes people have to jump through, right?
Yeah.
And then, I don't feel like I need to justify my existence by just passing more and more or introducing more and more bills. I want there to be a good purpose for it, and I think things like this are key to why, I asked to be on the Criminal Justice Committee, because it still keeps me in touch with law enforcement. And I see a lot of the first responder bills come through here. The behavioral health piece, I don't know if it would come through my committee or not, but it might touch one of my other ones. I also sit on the Insurance and Financial Services Committee.
That certainly helps with mental health when I know there's insurance involved.
Yes.
The cost of life impacts your mental health.
Absolutely it does.
So
And
you're bringing up a really good point from your aspect, having that frontline perspective on the legislative side. But how important is it, in your opinion, to bring in first responders, frontline workers on a lot of different issues from the line to be like, yo, what's going on? And not just chiefs. I'm not dogging chiefs and bosses. They have a role. They're good at getting equipment in the politics of our job. But like, sometimes you got to ask the people arresting people about the arresting procedures that are law to then get it right for the police officer, the community, and the potential bad person.
yeah, I think it's a must. And especially when we have committees that make initial decisions on getting something to the floor, if people don't have the knowledge or they don't have the insight from people, it gets lost, right? We need frontline people that can come in and help shape policy and help advocate for policy. And we've had some that's been fantastic, but I think it needs to be a very consistent effort on whatever realm of frontline policy that we're working on and funding. So yeah, I think in the early stages when representatives, and hopefully people are listening, right? Representatives, senators, whoever is starting to craft policy, we should be calling experts. And when I say experts, I mean the frontline guys that do it every day, experts, not someone that necessarily just wrote a textbook.
Yeah, put your resume away.
Yeah.
How many calls did you go on the last 5 years?
Exactly.
Does that apply to this?
Spot on.
And if it's an administrative thing, certainly talk to the administrators of the agencies, right?
Yeah, and it's getting the different perspectives. I talk to the unions. I talk to the chiefs. I talk to the frontline guys. Sometimes I just go buy them a beer and we sit down and talk, Hey, don't come to my office. Let me come to you and let's sit down and, hey, what are things that are going on right now? I've been out for 3 years. What's going on? What's the new issues? What can I do to help? And so we talk through things like that. Just informally is the best way, honestly.
Would you recommend that to other politicians like you? Like, just call them and see if you can hang out? It doesn't have to be first responders. It could be any group you're trying to target.
Yeah, 100%. The fire guys make so much money, I always invite them so they pick up the
Which
bill,
city,
right?
though? Hang on. It depends on the contract, union leader. You know how this works.
I'm joking, but yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I get the most value out of in an informal setting where we can just sit back and just talk. Just the same as when I sat in a patrol car, it seems more real.
There's nothing more human than sitting in a circle telling stories or chatting.
Exactly. We used to call it cruiser spooning. You ever heard of that term? Where you pull a car to car, cruiser spooning.
I never heard it, but I knew exactly what you meant. I've seen the two cops time. Like, what are they doing? You're like, it's always like that meme, like when it's about what my girlfriend thinks I'm doing and what I'm actually doing type of thing.
Yes.
And it's like what people think those cops are doing, what they're actually doing, and they're showing each other stupid cartoons. Memes. It's just guys be guys or girls be girls. People, they're
Usually
humaning.
a fireman.
Yeah, they're pulling fireman stuff. He's looking at my fire buddies. All right, so last question for you. So considering your position, current political figure, retired police officer, what message do you want to convey to those first responders, their families, about the state's commitment to honoring the sacrifices, ensuring their well-being around all of this stuff we talked about today?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's, like I said earlier, it's, I think we have 5 or 6 first responders currently serving in the House, right? And so know that we have people that understand on the inside, but I think there's still this mental separation between our first responders and our elected officials, and we need to break that barrier down because just like we talked about, we have to have this informal communication. Listen, us elected officials, we get a title, woohoo. You know, it's not about, I'd rather people call me Sarge, you know.
It feels more human.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather just break down that barrier, have people comfortable to call my cell phone, call my office, and we just chat, you know, and I want to break that barrier down and let people know we're not any different. You know, some of us need more education on the aspects of the career, and then the ones that are in here, tell us what's going on now. I mean, most of us have been out for at least a couple of years, right, and doing other things. Some of us were administrators prior to, like we have a couple of sheriffs in office right now. We still need those perspectives, right? We need to hear from people, but no, the fight is on. We're in there talking about things all the time. You may not always see it on the news, but there's 110 of us in the House, and things don't always move quickly, but we talk about things all the time, and there's people on both sides of the aisle that are very passionate about their police and fire guys. And I know that you don't pick one side or the other to talk to here, nor should you, but I think there's a lot of advocates to make things better. Some people just don't know what that better means. Yeah. So I think we need people to constantly have those conversations so we know what better is, right?
It feels like it should be that the frontline communities are so bipartisan, like they're non-political in the sense of like you get it, right? The red and the blue. It's like saying we all want clean water. Like, yeah, we can eat clean water. Yeah. It's the same on all sides. It's the public welfare of it. And the other thing I want to kind of express is that I say this to chiefs all the time that I know it's like, you know, chief, nobody comes to work here saying they're going to do a bad job today. And I truly believe that politicians don't go like, well, it's me the other day screwing up the world. This is going to be awesome. I hope that's not true. It seems like a James Bond bad guy.
Today? It's your toddler. Right.
Yeah.
They woke up from their nap.
Yeah, they woke up and chose violence, you know?
Yeah, I know. Right. It's, I'm not going to say there's not some jokes mixed in there somewhere, but no, I think just like any other profession, maybe there's some outliers that don't meet this general statement, but I think most people got into this because they truly feel passionate about helping their communities.
Yeah.
Very similar to frontline workers, right? So, I mean, I think there is probably an overlap in the feel-good piece, and it's just education. Yeah. Education's huge.
And connecting.
It is connecting. I have always been a network guy, you know, and I learned from my parents. My parents were in Amway at some point, and I learned how to do sales stuff, right? But you have to be good at relationship building and networking, and sometimes frontline workers are not always touchy-feely. So, I mean, you know, some of us on the elected official side need to understand how to navigate some of that and make some inroads there so we can have conversations. And it's not just one side thinking an outsider is trying to pry. You know, we want to be part of the same team.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let all the jerseys get in the way.
Yeah. And like, you know, I tell people this all the time. Hey, when you call 911, we don't ask you if you're Republican or Democrat if we're going to come out, right? Same with our offices. We
already know. It's in the dispatch.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
But I mean, we do the same thing in our offices. I'm like, listen, if you need help, it doesn't matter if your guy is a Democrat or a Republican. They don't ask you when you call for help, right? They just want to be there for their people. So, yeah, I think that's really what it boils down to is we just need to make those inroads in networking and relationships.
Well, sir, I totally hope in the future we start looking at what we need as a group, and we just happen to have differences of opinion of how we get there, and we get it done.
Yeah, amen.
All right. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Yeah, thank you guys. Anytime.
Thank you for joining us on the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope everyone enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. Have a great day.